Anthony Elmore from Memphis, Tennessee, bringing to you a Black History lecture. My lecture today is Kenya's birth is part of the American Civil Rights Movement. The Civil Rights Movement was a struggle for social justice that took place mainly during the 1950s and 60s for blacks to gain equal rights under the law in the United States. The most important note of the Civil Rights Movement in America is that the Civil Rights Movement was not just a black movement, but the Civil Rights Movement was a black movement supported by whites of goodwill. The Civil Rights Movement led to the formation of the American Committee on Africa. The American Committee on Africa, or ACOA as it's called, was formed by a white man by the name of George Hauser and a black man by the name of Bayard Rustin. Now, on August the 15th, 1956, ACOA brought in a 26-year-old Kenyan by the name of Tom Mboya. Now, ACOA was an organization whose goal was to support the liberation struggles against colonialism, apartheid, and informing the American public about African issues. So they brought in 26-year-old Tom Mboya, who had written a pamphlet called The Kenyan Question, The African Answer. Now, Tom Mboya was an African trade unionist, educationist, Pan-Africanist, author, and independence activist. Most important is the fact that Tom Mboya was one of Kenya's founding fathers, and it was the American Civil Rights Movement that supported Tom Mboya. Tom Mboya understood that if Kenya was to become an independent nation, then its populace had to be educated so they could run a government after the British were to leave Kenya. And Mboya's first major achievement in America was gaining the support of civil rights leader A. Philip Randolph. He was president of the Black Pullman Porters. A. Philip Randolph became not only a mentor to Tom Mboya, A. Philip Randolph via the AFL-CIO gave Tom Mboya a $34,000 check to build a union hall in Kenya. Mind you, Kenya at the time was a British protectorate. It was called British East Africa. This donation secured Tom Mboya at becoming a bona fide leader and player in Kenya. Tom Mboya was invited to speak at colleges in America, and while at those colleges, Tom Mboya would talk to the college presidents about awarding scholarship to African students. In fact, Tom Mboya was so successful at getting scholarships and transportation for African students that he became almost a folk hero in America. Tom Mboya, in fact, in 1959 was scheduled for a 6-week speaking tour about Africa, about its issues, and Tom Mboya became, in fact, the de facto leader of all of Africa. But during his speaking tours in America, it was so successful that he had sellout audiences that they had to book 10 additional days for him to speak even in Canada because people wanted to hear this young, brilliant African scholar, a very articulate Tom Mboya. He made over 100 engagements speaking as much as 6 times a day. He didn't have notes. His tour was so successful that he awakened Black Americans to the acceptance of identifying with their African heritage. Tom Mboya created so much enthusiasm and change in America that he was able to acquire so many scholarships for African students that they had to charter an airplane to bring African students from Nairobi to New York. This is in 1959. The program was called Airlift America. The program was so successful that it gained the endorsements of singer Harry Belafonte, baseball great Jackie Robinson, and actor Sidney Poitier, who lent their names on a letter asking Americans to donate money to help Africans to secure travel to America. This program was called Airlift America in 1959. In 1959, they brought, separately from the 81 original students, there was a young man who came to school in Hawaii, and his name was Barack Obama Sr. On April the 11th, 1959, Tom Mboya not only marched with Dr. King, Tom Mboya spoke at a Dr. King rally. And on May 13th, 1959, the SCLC and Dr. Martin Luther King sponsored Tom Mboya an African Freedom Dinner. Also in 1959, Tom Mboya was so popular in America that Howard University awarded him an honorary doctorate degree. Tom Mboya was a part of the American Civil Rights Movement, and the American Civil Rights Movement was a part of Africa, and all of this coincided together. Please note that it was the Airlift American program where the 23-year-old Kenyan Barack Obama Sr. would come to America. Thomas Joseph Mboya was so significant in America that his program influenced our 1960 presidential election. Now, do not take my word for it. Just Google the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum, and what you will find, it reads, quote, "At a key point in the 1960 presidential campaign, a dynamic young leader from Kenya named Tom Mboya visited Senator John F. Kennedy. Mboya led a campaign of his own that would eventually bring hundreds of African students to America for higher education, including Barack Obama Sr., President Obama's father. Kennedy's decision to support the effort became an issue in the election and possibly a factor in its narrow victory." Unquote. Let me share some intricate details about John F. Kennedy's 1960 election campaign. In 1960, black people were Republicans associated with the Lincoln Party. Now, Richard Nixon was Republican, and even Dr. Martin Luther King's father and the black ministers supported Richard Nixon because black people and black ministers were not about to support Kennedy, who was a Catholic. And Kennedy had to find a way to make inroads into the black community. And what Kennedy did as part of his presidential platform was Kennedy made it a part of his platform that he would support the education of African leaders, and he would support the education of Africans. That was part of his platform. Now, this education of Africans did not bother white people, but it endured black people to support Kenya or support Kennedy because Kennedy was supporting black people. Now, it was in March of 1960 that Time magazine put Tom Mboya on its cover. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please understand that we were in Jim Crow America, and you got a black man on the cover of Time magazine. This was a great achievement for Black America. Black America had gotten involved in Airlift America. They gave $1, $2, $3. They gave all that they could. Most importantly, the Airlift America program, that it was in I think it was July the 26th, 1960, Tom Mboya was facing a crisis. He had so many students with scholarships and they had no money, and the new Democratic nominee was John F. Kennedy, and John F. Kennedy allowed Tom Mboya to come to speak with him, and John F. Kennedy agreed in July of 1960 that since they could not find sponsorship, he did not want to let these scholarships go to waste, and the Kennedy Foundation agreed to spend $100,000 to bring these African students to America. Now, Kennedy did this on condition that this donation be kept anonymous. But the Nixon campaign found out about it. There was a big hearing in Congress, and it was later found out that John F. Kennedy agreed to give this money, not to buy the black vote, but he was authentically trying to help Africans get an education. And when this information hit the news in America, it changed the hearts and minds of many black people in America. Most importantly, this effort that Kennedy did changed the mind of singer Harry Belafonte. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's go back to 1960. The most popular singer and most popular black singer in America was Harry Belafonte, who in 1956 he sold 1 million albums. The most important endorsement that John F. Kennedy was to gain in 1960 was the endorsement of singer Harry Belafonte, who was like the Michael Jackson of his time. Even though he was not a politician or a religious guy, he was simply an entertainer. The first thing that I want you to see, I want you to see and hear Harry Belafonte tell the story of how Tom Mboya changed not only his life, but how the efforts of Tom Mboya changed the hearts and minds.
I began focusing more intensely on Africa and received enormous encouragement from a woman who had now become a friend of mine by the name of Eleanor Roosevelt. My very first experience with Africa was the movies. Tarzan from the Apes. The one thing that I came to know when I left that movie house was that the last thing I wanted to be was an African. But thanks to Paul Robeson and others, and the gatherings held at Mrs. Roosevelt's home, I came to know Africa. I had a chance to meet a lot of young leaders from all over the world who are very much engaged in liberation work and movements. I grew particularly close to feelings for Africa that I might otherwise never have known. One of the men that I met was a young Kenyan by the name of Tom Mboya. He was an important liberator in the struggle for independence against the British. Tom Mboya, along with Jackie Robinson and myself, a wonderful woman by the name of Cora Weiss, brought young Kenyan students to America. Our first airlift was 81 students. And among our many students who benefited from this program, Barack Obama Sr. was one of them. We placed them in universities all over America, paid for their tuition, and worked tenaciously with Tom Mboya for Kenya's future development. In return for their education, they were to go back to help build their nation. It was a rich human harvest for Kenya.
What you must understand is that it was Harry Belafonte who had the courage to go against the traditional black electorate, and Harry Belafonte came out and supported John F. Kennedy. Now, the Kennedy, Tom Mboya connection got John F. Kennedy the black vote that he was needed. Now, John F. Kennedy died of an assassin's bullet in 1963, November 22nd. Kenya became a free country on December 12, 1963. Black and white civil rights leaders celebrated in Kenya. Now, 50 years ago, on July 5th, 1969, Tom Mboya died from an assassin's bullet in Kenya. There's a book that reads, quote, Tom Mboya, the man Kenya wanted to forget. Kenya also forgot the role that the American civil rights movement played in the development of Kenya. You see, ladies and gentlemen, in 1960, it was civil rights attorney and Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall who went to London, and it was Thurgood Marshall who wrote Kenya's Bill of Rights and Constitution. It was the civil rights movement that was a part of the birth of Kenya. But what you do not see, even though during the birth of Kenya in December 1963, all of the great black civil rights leaders were in Kenya to celebrate. But it is Kenya where you do not find the Tom Mboya, not Tom Mboya, but the Jackie Robinson Expressway, or the Kennedy Memorial Museum, or the Jackie Robinson Highway. There is nothing that you can find in Kenya that elevates and honors the civil rights movement in America. That was a part of Kenya's history. We in Memphis, Tennessee, for this Black History celebration, asked the Kenyan government to support the idea of the Tom Mboya, Dr. Martin Luther King Cultural and Educational Center in Nairobi, Kenya, where we can tell this story of the black history, and as it's a part of Kenya's history. We, ladies and gentlemen, say that Kenya should be the returning point where African Americans come to Africa. It is the most positive story in that it was Barack Obama Jr., whose father came from Kenya as a part of the Airlift America program, that thanks to Kenya, thanks to the Civil Rights Movement, thanks to Tom Mboya, we got the first black president in America. And this was a part of, because of the part of the Civil Rights Movement. Barack Obama Jr. is part of the Civil Rights Movement. All of this ties together, and we come together to teach you this black history. I am Anthony Elmore in Memphis, Tennessee, bringing you a Black History Lecture. Thank you very much.